Between 4:45 and 5:30, something happened to Ellen Greenberg. We have the timeline down to minutes, even seconds in this case. So what does it really say? Let's talk about the day of the incident. January 26, 2011. At 7 a.m., Ellen spoke to her mother on the phone. There was nothing alarming said. At 12 p.m., Ellen had an exchange of text messages with her friend, asking, "Are you getting out early?" And she said, "Yes, thank goodness." At 1:15 p.m., Ellen leaves her school early because of weather conditions. At 1:26, Ellen stops for gas. She spent $41 at Pump 4, filling up her tank. At 2:30 p.m., she makes a call to a local restaurant. At 2:33, she calls someone and the call lasts about 30 seconds. In her apartment, she is remotely entering grades into her computer for her students. 3:47, Ellen sends her very last text message. At 4:45, Sam, her fiance, leaves their apartment. He is captured on surveillance camera entering into the gym on the lowest floor. At 4:46, Ellen uses her laptop. At 5:30, Sam exits the gym. He goes back up to the apartment and realizes that he cannot get in. Despite trying to use his key and banging on the door, Ellen does not answer. From 5:30 to 5:42, he is making phone calls. From 5:30 to 5:42, Sam is sending text messages and making phone calls to Ellen. From 5:32 to 5:54, he is emailing and texting Ellen. The messages are, "Hello, what are you doing? Open the door. I'm getting pissed. Hello, you better have an excuse. What the F? Ugh. And you have no idea." Then Sam went downstairs and asked Phil Hanton, the security guard, if he could get into the lock. Phil refused and said it was against policy. At 5:44, neighbors heard Sam calling Ellen's name multiple times. At an unknown time, Sam makes a call to Kamian Swartzman. This is Sam's cousin as well as an attorney. His uncle is an attorney as well. Guess at this time he's letting his cousin know that he is locked out of the apartment and that Ellen is in there. His cousin suggests going back down to the doorman and asking for help again. At 6 p.m., Sam talks to Phil again and says, "Can you please break down the door or something?" And Phil states it's against policy for him to break down the door, but he should call Ellen. From 6:07 to 6:10, Ellen gets calls from the lofts, from the apartment building that they stay in. No one answers. So Phil suggests that maybe they call 911. At 6:14, he calls his uncle attorney again and tells him that the doorman was not helpful and he still cannot get in. At 6:26, he gets a call from his cousin that he answers. His cousin and his uncle, that were both attorneys, suggest that they call 911. At 6:28, Sam is seen going up the elevator, apparently back to the apartment. At 6:30, his cousin and his uncle instruct him to break down the door and go in. This is when Sam breaks down the door and goes inside. They are on the phone with him when he finds Ellen unalived on the kitchen floor. Sam says he sees Ellen slumped against the cabinets and that there is red on her and that he doesn't know what's going on. His cousin and uncle instruct him to call 911 after they hear him screaming about Ellen. At 6:33, Sam calls 911. The 911 call is very interesting, and I have a whole video coming up on the 911 call because there's a lot of information here. But Sam calls 911 and he is unsure of what's going on. They instruct him to do CPR. He says, "Do I have to?" They instruct him to lay her flat and to take off her sweater so that they can get to her chest. And that is when Sam says that there is a kitchen utensil in her chest. At this point, he cannot do CPR. He is still on the phone, and responders are on their way. At 6:36, first responders come to the scene and they see Ellen. She is found in an upright position against the cabinets. There is a kitchen utensil 4 inches into her chest. There is a strainer full of blueberries as well as oranges. It seems like maybe she was cutting fruit when this all happened. 2 clean kitchen utensils were found in the sink, and Ellen was later discovered to have over 20 kitchen utensil wounds, 10 of them being to her neck and the back of her head. At 6:40, they declared that Ellen was no longer here with us. At 7:30, Sam's cousin and uncle, those attorneys he was on the phone with, arrive at the apartments. And this was after Sam Goldberg talked to them multiple times on the phone. 7:30 p.m., the detective requests a ME, a medical examiner, and by 8:27, there are detectives on scene and working the scene. The next day at 3 a.m., Ellen's body was removed from the apartment. At 7:41, both of Ellen's parents were interviewed by police. During this time, Sam Goldberg's uncle and cousin, that were both attorneys, take the time to call a cleanup crew and have them come to the apartments to clean the scene. And this is before Ellen's body scan was even done. They also request that they come in and get Sam's belongings, which also included Ellen's laptop. At 9 a.m., the body scan of Ellen was done by Dr. Osborne. Dr. Marlon Osborne performed the body scan. And at first, this is all written up as someone else has done this. He does not believe this was a self-done case. He writes it down as, on this same day, Sam's family arranges for that cleanup crew to come in and completely clean the scene. They pay for it and everything. They also have had multiple people come into the apartment to collect belongings of Sam's. And not only Sam's belongings, but Ellen's purse, her laptop, and her phone were all removed by Sam's family. And then after this, the police have a search warrant for the property. But there's obviously not a lot there because it's been cleaned up and all of her property has been removed. So to be clear, this apartment was cleaned up and Ellen's belongings were all removed before this search warrant was even applied for. I will have a whole separate video on the incident, everything that had happened to Ellen, her body scan, and all of that. I'm just getting into right now the timeline, and there's going to be a part 2. I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to continue in the next part. Thank you for joining me for this. This stuff is always long because it's minute by minute, but it's so important. So click that follow button, and I will see you next time.